Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to the Nevada Commission on Ethics meeting. At this point in time, I would like to go and call roll. Chair Wallen here, Vice Chair Dufferin.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Towler.
Here.
Commissioner Yin.
Here.
Commissioner Lowry.
Here.
Okay. All right. And I don't see, and then Commissioner Oscarson.
Here.
And I don't see Commissioner Sheets. Is Commissioner Sheets joining us? No. All righty. And then for staff, we have Commission Counsel Chase.
Here.
Executive Director Armstrong.
Here.
Associate Counsel Bassett.
Here.
Senior Legal Researcher Hayden.
Here.
Executive Assistant Perdoza.
Here.
All right. I think I got everybody at this point in time. Let's go ahead and do the pledge. All right, there's our flag. Right.
Well, Chairman Wallen, this is Commissioner Grunwald. I'm on the
Commissioner
telephone.
Greenwald, I'm sorry, I didn't see your face. Welcome. All right,
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag
of the United
of
States of
of the
America
States.
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, now is my computer just totally going kaflooey? All right, I don't know what happened to my video, but we're back. All right, welcome everyone. At this point in time, I'd like to ask the executive director if he has received any public comment, either be it by email.
We have not received any written public comment, Chair.
Okay. And Executive Assistant Pedrosa, do we have any public comment online?
We do not have any public comment online.
All right, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the November 17th, 2021 commission minutes. All commissioners were present and may approve the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? No. Right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as read?
So moved.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, item 4, Executive Director's Agency Status Report. Executive Director Armstrong, welcome. This is your first commission meeting, and we're looking forward to hearing all the great things you've done in your short period of time here with us. So please begin.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Ross Armstrong, Executive Director. I just want to start by especially thanking the staff here at the Ethics Commission for the warm welcome and giving me, having patience and giving me grace as I get my sea legs in the position. It has been a wonderful start to this new adventure, and they have been wonderful, as have the commissioners. So I just want to start by thanking everybody for making my entry so welcome. And the first item that we have in terms of the executive director's report is our fiscal year 2022 budget status. The fiscal year ends on June 30th of this year. We are on track to be within our budget. There are some budget categories that we'll have to be strategic about spending down during this base year, including in-state travel, which we all know has been curtailed due to the pandemic. I think we do have good plans for spending down training and information system equipment, including the iPads for the commissioners' use. So that is where we are headed in terms of this budgetary fiscal year. Again, it's important because it's a base year. Are there any questions about this current budget year before I move on to the quick presentation on planning for the next budget cycle?
Fellow commissioners, any questions? No. Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, so the next item I have, I will share a presentation on I wanted to get the commission ready for the budget building and legislative process. And so I think, can everybody see the PowerPoint presentation? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start with the budget building process, and really there's two phases. The first is the executive branch process, and then the second is the legislative branch process. And it starts with the agency building the budget with a set of parameters that were given by the governor's finance office in terms of building the budget. There's a lot of technical behind the scenes work that the commission itself as members you won't have to worry about, but staff will make sure that we are completing. There are certain decision units that get built for consideration by the governor, and then if it's accepted by the governor, by the legislature. Then what happens is in September, the agency will submit its final proposed budget to the governor's finance office, and through the fall, they will vet it. And the governor produces a recommended budget for executive branch agencies in the winter, and then usually releases that during the state of the state just before the legislative session. Then the legislative session kicks off and it starts with typically a budget presentation and a hearing. We are, in comparison to a lot of other agencies, we're a fairly simple one budget account agency. And so that usually goes, I think, pretty quick for us, but it's an opportunity for legislators to ask questions about any enhancement units, any changes to our budget, and to really get an understanding of how the agency operates from a budgetary perspective. Then that hearing usually happens in the first part of the session. And then as the session starts to wind down, they'll have a work session where they will move our budget out of committee to the main floors of the House or of the Assembly and the Senate. That work session is an opportunity for them to make any changes to the proposed budget. So if they have any changes, tweaks to the budget we propose, that occurs in the work session. And then there's approval and passage from the legislature, and it goes on to the governor for approval at that point. Some key budget dates for the commission to be aware of. In late February, they said late February or early March, there'll be a budget process kickoff. It will essentially be, I'm guessing that this year, again, it will be a Zoom meeting with all government agencies, and we're given basically the rules of the road for building our budget. The next session, it's the same basic model. It's been my experience, it's the same basic model each year, but that there's also, they always have a couple of tweaks to the process that we'll keep in mind and work with the Administrative Services Division to appropriately build the budget. September 1st is our deadline date for getting our full budget completed into the governor's finance office for them to consider and build as we approach the legislative session. The session will begin on February 6th. It's 120 days long. Some key information about the budget dates. It took me a while to really figure out when state fiscal years were and what number they were, but July 1st, 2023 will begin fiscal year 2024, and on July 1st, 2024 will begin state fiscal year 25. So the budget we'll be building over the next 9 months is for the 24-25 biennium. Some key terms as we go through this process of building the budget that may help you understand what we're doing in the background. There's a 2 times cap, which is a formula for determining the base budget. And it usually is, they take the amount of money you spent in your first year of the current biennium, so the year we're currently in right now, and they multiply it by 2, and that's how much money you have to start off with. If you want more resources, then you can create an enhancement unit, which is a request for additional new expenditures. And then there's also mandate units, like let's say if if the federal government passed a law that every state had to do something related to ethics and that was going to cost us more money, we could put in a mandate decision unit, which they would then consider a little bit differently than an enhancement unit. So that the commissioners are aware, and we have commissioners of different length on the commission, how our ethics commission budget is funded. The vast majority is from local government assessments. That's the county and state governments who receive an assessment and are billed regularly. And then the rest is from general fund. We don't have any federal sources of revenue or grant funding. It's state general fund and local government assessments. And then we provide a service and legal analysis, right? We're not making widgets. And so you can see that in terms of our expenses, the vast majority of our expenses is with personnel. Information services, computers, those types of things are wrapped up in a different separate budget account. And then we also have general operations, things like rent and other operating expenses. Cost allocations are allocations that are assessed on each government agency for different administrative functions of the state. So some potential budget priorities identified. I know as part of the interview process for coming to the commission, there's made a presentation about a public information officer, a position to really enhance our training and outreach and to manage our online presence and educational materials. So we'll work on building that decision unit for the commission's consideration. That will include the salary and benefits costs and then expenses related. There's some pretty typical formulas for rent and equipment that the budget office works in pretty automatically when you request a new position. Some things we may want to consider. There are a number of online training platforms, and so that might be an expense we would want to package up in one decision unit that would really not only give us the position, but give that position the tools to do an excellent job. And then in some discussions with the team, the other potential requests would be for some additional investigation resources, including contract funding for complex or special cases, or in some cases, there's a surge in demand so that we don't fall behind and create a backlog. And in talking with the investigation team, a service that could be helpful in speeding up some of the cases would be transcription services, because that can really get bogged down if we have a lot of witnesses and we're transcribing all those to have that information. And then there may be some additional priorities as I receive feedback from the commission and we think about staff, if there are additional needs for the commission to do its work. So really the next steps for the commission staff will be to attend the budget kickoff for this year's cycle. So that will probably be after the February meeting. I anticipate it'll be before the March meeting. And so I can provide an update at that time about anything special or spectacular during that particular budget kickoff. And then we'll prioritize and craft any enhancement units, making the best case for how those enhancement units and investments in funding best serve the people of the state of Nevada, and then work with our administrative services division to complete all the technical work of the budget building prior to the September 1st deadline. So that's the budget. We really are going to kick off here in a couple of weeks, and we have until September 1st to nail down what our proposed budget will be.
Chair, I have a quick question for Ross.
Yes.
Ross, have you had a chance to meet with our budget analysts yet? And or have they even been assigned to us yet?
Yes, we've met with our budget analyst at the administrative services division, and so I met with them early. We kind of went over the budget and some items for this time. So that connection has been made. Our legislative council bureau analyst, who usually helps us walk through the process too, so they're not surprised when it comes time to legislative session. We're working on setting up a meeting. That person just changed, so they're trying to get that person onboarded and me onboarded at the same time. So we're like, let's wait a little bit before we meet, because we both won't know what we're talking about if we meet too early. So, but that connection has been made.
Great, thank you.
Fellow
Ross,
commissioners?
Madam Chair, I have a question for Mr.
Yeah.
Armstrong.
Commissioner Oscarson.
Mr. Armstrong, welcome. This is not a new process to you. I can fondly recall you and your team members before us talking about budgets and the whys and wherefores and how to. So it's great to have you with the knowledge base that you have. My question was, when we were talking about the PIO role, does that roll into training and some of the outreach and those kind of things that we talked about, or is that a different title that we would need to ask for to roll that all into one? Because we were talking about outreach and those kind of things, and that person would be engaged in doing those things. So is that the proper title we should ask for?
Yeah, this is Director Armstrong. In preparing for that presentation, I looked at two state positions, a public information officer and a training officer, because those class series are both state positions. The training officer series really focuses on internal training and training of staff, and the public information officer has a lot more in the job description about creating brochures and maintaining training and doing that external outreach. So I think in general, when folks think about a PIO, they think of somebody more like a press secretary, just answering questions, doing press releases. But when you dive into the state job description for the PIO, there's a lot of that, maintaining the website, educational materials, and outreach to that external audience, which I think is the right fit. We're a little bit interesting in that we have unclassified staff, and so there's lots of flexibility in terms of what we have positions do, more so than if they were classified positions. But the classifications that are in the state system, that PIO is the closest to, I think, what the commission is hoping for and wanting to do with the enhanced education piece.
And Ross, are there different levels of that job? I mean, there's a PIO 1, PIO 2, and when you budget for that, do you have the flexibility of somebody say from another entity or organization were to come and apply for that job? Are there different levels that we would have the flexibility to offer them?
Yeah, so there is a PIO 1 and a PIO 2. I think when we build the enhancement request, it makes sense to ask for the PIO 2. One of the things that in the class specification distinguishes the 1 and the 2 is that the 2 handles controversial or confidential matters, which is what we do at the Ethics Commission. And then in each position, you can budget anywhere from a step 1 to a step 10. And typically you budget at a step 5 in your process so that you can get somebody with experience, and it doesn't, you don't budget at a step 1 and then have to bring someone in a step 10 and blow up your budget.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Great job, sir.
Any more questions on budget before I go to the legislative process?
Just one other thing that you might want to look into, and we've been trying for several years now, is getting our staff in parity with some of their counterparts at judicial. So that's something else to look into.
Thank you. I noted that.
Right. Any other questions? All right. Very good. Go ahead and continue.
Okay. So for the record, this is Director Armstrong again. The legislative process, really, this presentation, I think most folks are familiar with the general legislative process, but from an agency perspective, in terms of how we approach the session, this is what this information is. And so the basic process is an agency or legislator or one of the committees has an idea and it becomes a bill draft request is drafted. So it's called a BDR. So if I use the term BDR throughout this next time, you'll know that's kind of a bill before it officially becomes a bill. Once it's introduced in either the Assembly or the Senate, then it becomes a bill and it's assigned a number, either AB or SB, depending on which is the house that the bill starts in. And then it's considered by the first house, and the process includes, being assigned to a committee. Then there's a hearing where they hear the merits of the bill. There's a work session where it could be possible that there's an amendment, either a friendly or a hostile amendment. But the work session is where the bill will be modified and then sent to the floor for a full vote. There are times if a bill is not going to go very far, where it may get a hearing, it may not even ever get a hearing. But if we're headed towards success in a legislative process, it'll get assigned a committee, there'll be a hearing, a work session, and then it'll go to the floor for a vote. And then it'll head over to the other house where it will repeat that process with different players, different questions. And then it will be approved by the second house. If there are differences in the versions, then there's a couple different processes that might happen to get the language correct and passed by both houses in the exact same form. And then it heads to the governor's office for signature or veto. There's a time limit for the governor, depending on if the legislature is in session or not. And if there is a veto and the legislature is no longer in session, then the legislature can consider it at the next session. So I think everyone's aware that the ethics bill was vetoed last session by the governor. And so it will be brought up before the legislature during the 2023 session. And they can either vote to override the bill or override the veto, which would mean the bill becomes law, or sustain the veto and not override the veto. There's a lot of work before we get to the start of the session. And so we'll be focused on that through the next 9 months. There are interim committees that are made up of the Senate and Assembly. They meet during the time between the two legislative sessions. Our assigned committee is the Legislative Operations and Elections Committee. Chair Brittany Miller and then Vice Chair James Orenshaw. They don't have any meetings scheduled yet, but I've already reached out to the chair and the vice chair to let them know that if they would like a presentation on the Ethics Commission and to hear ethics issues in Nevada during the interim for consideration, that we would be happy to provide a presentation. And so they might consider different changes to law, which would become a committee bill, which typically have high success of passing during a session. And then also during this time, executive agencies consider the policy changes and work with the governor's team on any potential bill draft requests we might want as an agency request. And then the bill drafts request are drafted and prepared for the legislative session in consultation with LCB Legal to get the bill draft language what it needs to be.
Ross,
Yes.
it's James. Are you anticipating Assemblywoman Miller granting you an opportunity to do a presentation on the Ethics Committee?
She thanked me for reaching out, but we didn't go any further than that in terms of identifying a time. They're one of the only committees that doesn't have their interim meeting schedule set. So I think that committee did a lot of the heavy lifting during the special session related to redistricting. So they're probably kind of resetting and figuring out what their plan is for the interim. And so I'm hopeful that she will do that, but there's no indication yet that they've set or even given us a date for their own meetings or one where they might hear the Ethics Commission.
Let you and I visit about that offline when we get some time. Maybe I can help with that.
That sounds great.
Yeah, with your permission, Madam Chair.
Yes, of course, I would appreciate that, Commissioner Oscarson.
Just some history in terms of previous ethics legislation. As I'm sure most folks are aware, last session we had AB 65, which was amended. It passed the legislature and then was vetoed by the governor. In 2019, there was a similar ethics bill that passed the Senate but did not receive a vote in the Assembly. And then in 2017, there were a pair of bills. One was heard, but then there was no further action. And then the other was amended and passed by the legislature. So the last time we had changes in substantial changes was in 2017. Some key dates for everybody: January through October is when the interim committees meet. September 1st is the same deadline as our budget to get agency bill draft requests. So if we're going to have a bill that's the Ethics Commission bill, getting that to the governor's office by September 1st is the requirement. On November 8th, members of the legislature are elected, and I just note that because I've had some cases where we're working closely with a legislature and a legislator, and then they don't get reelected, and so then you kind of scramble to figure out what you're going to do for the next session. And then February 6th, the legislative session begins, and June 6th it ends. So just some thoughts about AB 65. I stole this slide from my interview presentation, just that the passage of AB 65 was good public policy in terms of the changes to the ethics law that the commission was looking at. As we know, there was the amendment from the legislature that changed it substantially and was the reason that the governor vetoed it. But there were some really important changes to the ethics law that will be valuable for consideration moving forward. And it just shows some of the main themes from AB 65. So some things for the commission to consider as we move forward with the legislative planning for the next legislative session is, should we pursue another attempt to pass the provisions of AB 65? Are there specific changes that are a higher priority than others? And then would we like legislation development to be a standing item for the commission meetings? Or are there other approaches the commission would like to take in terms of the legislature? So that's that quick presentation on both of those, and I will stop sharing and open it up for any questions or thoughts and feedback on either the budget or the legislative process.
To my fellow commissioners' thoughts on what he's talking about. I know last time when we put AB 65 together, we had a subcommittee, legislative subcommittee. I thought that worked rather well. Okay. So I think we would like to go ahead and do that again. And I'll be looking for volunteers to be on that committee. Okay. Besides myself and Vice Chair Dufferin, I think we can only have one other person to keep it not full commission, correct? Commission Counsel Chase.
Yes, Tracy Chase, Commission Counsel, for the record. It's preferable that the subcommittee not be a quorum of the commission itself, because you might as well just go ahead and notice a commission meeting.
Make it easier and stuff. And, so I want to open it up to my commissioners and your thoughts. I mean, AB 65, it had everything, including the kitchen sink in it, okay? And that was before the legislature put their amendment on it. Thoughts, are there sections in there that we really need to go and put in and make sure we get it passed? Or you want to take the whole kitchen sink back again? What are your thoughts?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Oscarson.
First, if nobody wants to delve into that, I'd be happy to serve on that committee and help however I could. Secondly, I think it's prudent for whoever's on that committee to review the governor's comments and review the testimony that happened in the committee during those times and see how we fine tune that to be as good as it possibly can. Well, I thought it was as good as it possibly could be. We could probably take some insight from the meeting minutes and from the comments that were made and see how we fine tune it to be. I think all those things are important to have in there. I think we just need to figure out how to present it so that it doesn't seem like there are some challenges to some different bodies and different groups.
Good comments. Other commissioners, comments?
Chair, I have a quick comment for you.
Yes, Vice Chair Duffer.
I think as our executive director gets his feet wet and has some experience in his role, he'll be able to bring to the subcommittee some maybe additional changes or maybe fine tuning the ones that we requested originally. And I also would encourage every commissioner to, if they want to, review what we had in 65 and just please bring to the subcommittee before we meet some of their thoughts, maybe today. I know you're asking their thoughts today, so that's helpful as well. So that we can, as a group, as a subcommittee, we can kind of dial down into what really is important, because I kind of felt we did bring the kitchen sink and everything inside that almost too much, and I think it might have been overwhelming to the legislature last time. So I think you're smart about having the subcommittee again and relooking at what we did originally and maybe fine tuning it and maybe modernizing it with Ross's input, since he's new and maybe he has some fresh ideas about how we can move this forward. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that we should, and what I would like for my fellow commissioners to do is go through AB 65 and give us your priorities on it. What you think is a priority of the commission must-haves that we need to have, because I'd like to have your input on it, because I think that'd be a good way for the subcommittee to go and narrow it down. I know that when we had the subcommittee and we took out a few little things, but we're like, oh, but we really need this and we really need this. And pretty soon we had a huge bill. So I'd like my fellow commissioners to weigh in and tell us what they think our priorities should be. So that way we can say, right, 4 of them.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, I had another quick thought. We probably should, before we meet with the legislature, meet with the governor's office and see if there's any appetite about actually carving the legislature out and even basically talk about the amendment that they gave us and see if he has any appetite to do that whatsoever. Maybe there's some wiggle room in there that we can work with the legislature and the governor together. But because if we don't do that, and we might be in the same boat that we were last time, where we have this fight with the legislature about us overseeing them on some level. So that we might want to meet with the governor's office and say, what's their appetite, and talk more about as we talked earlier about how we can move this forward, and just kind of talk to them first. I think that's really important.
Okay, good thought. So let's do this. So Commissioner Oscarson, you want to be on the subcommittee, okay? So we'll put you on there, and then I guess myself.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Sorry to interrupt, but we were going to notice the appointment of the subcommittee if you wanted one at the next meeting. So
Okay.
we'll have that on your agenda at that time, and then you can appoint the
Perfect.
subcommittee.
perfect. Put that on the agenda. But I think we know where we're going, so, all right, thank you. Right, so everyone get your thoughts to us before our next meeting, right? Let's see, any other comments or questions of Executive Director Armstrong on his legislative report? No. Okay. All right, you may continue.
Thank you, Chair. And then the two remaining items on the agency status report includes the Campaign Legal Center report. The Nevada was recognized as having two best practices in terms of transparency for ethics in government, which included our online complaint portal and then the ability for folks to request advisory opinions online. They produced a report. It is in your packet. I know that Chair, there were some other ideas in that report that had those top 10 ideas that you were interested in, including heat maps, which shows some data visualizations of where complaints are coming in, and also the user-friendly website. I have been working with the executive assistant, Pedroza, on making some changes to the website now. We just got notice that they're changing the website software platform in the next 18 months, so hopefully a more modern, user-friendly approach that we can implement here on that front. And we'll take a look. I don't know if we have the volume for needing a full-blown heat map, but certainly some data visualizations that make what the commission's work do more digestible for folks and easier to grasp and monitor. I think especially thinking about how our local governments pay quite a bit in assessments. And so is there a good way to communicate with them how much service each of them are receiving? So I like both of those ideas. The Campaign Legal Center is going to have a virtual town hall presentation next week that I will be at to discuss what we do here in Nevada and how it is helpful in terms of promoting transparency. So that was wonderful news. And along that, there's been some since getting my feet wet, we've done some social media and outreach efforts kind of along the same lines as promoting that we were in that report of the top 10. And there's a page in your documents that show some of the social media samples. We've added a header and an image to the ethics Twitter account. And we were able to tweet out. We have about 2 tweets out a week, which seems to be doing pretty well. The one that is in your packet that shows, it has like the infographic, had over 300 views and then 8 clicks directly to the form to complete acknowledgements, which is great. And then I'm really starting to understand the potential power of our LinkedIn for longer form outreach and education, to where if we can get those public officers and employees who are on LinkedIn to be following our page, I think there's an avenue for kind of that passive education and outreach where we can post longer articles and thoughts about compliance and tips for those public officers and employees and how to comply with the ethics law. So really trying to work that Twitter and LinkedIn systems and getting those going and getting regular content up on those. In terms of our communication plan for early 2022 in February, now that we have regular content, we'll focus on building our audiences. And in March is the filing season for campaigns, which is a good time to focus on some of those ethical issues that those who are public officers and candidates can run into, and be promoting education to have them avoid making those mistakes. And then other outreach that we've done, and some of it is similar to the communications plan I laid out in my interview for the position, is that we had a discussion with the governor's finance office about the ethics role in the American Rescue Plan funding, with this billions of dollars coming in, not only in that, but then the transportation, with all that extra money to be awarded out. We want to make sure people are keeping in mind the ethics law as they're awarding out that money. And then we were also able to get the public lawyers section of the state bar to email a reminder to all of their members who are public attorneys representing agencies, to have their individuals that are required to complete acknowledgements to get those in. And we saw quite a response. You could kind of tell when each attorney forward that on to an agency because we get a cluster from a particular city or town or agency of acknowledgements come in. So that was a good partnership, and I was grateful to that state bar section for getting it out. It was like within a couple hours of me sending it, it went out to all of those members. And then just thinking about some upcoming potential outreach opportunities, reached out to the doing kind of a access for our rural members, maybe in the spring. Hopefully the pandemic will calm down a bit. We can get out on the road. I know that the ELCO has one of the more active bar associations. So can we combine a CLE for the lawyers in ELCO with education for public officers in Northeastern Nevada? So I'm already trying to make those contacts. And then we were able to kind of take a look I was curious as the acknowledgements came in, if there were any particular parts of government that has pretty low compliance rates of those acknowledgements, and that might be a particular subset to target for education and outreach. And so we were kind of monitoring city and county manager acknowledgements, education, and the governor's cabinet. And I think our education partners are probably ripe for some extra outreach and education in terms of just based on the lack of acknowledgements coming in, honestly, and really their turnover and the craziness they've been going through, I can somewhat understand. But trying to use that acknowledgements, I kind of see that acknowledgement like your annual physical checkup at the doctor, right? Like if you're not doing that acknowledgement on a regular basis, you're probably not thinking about ethics on a regular basis. And so missing that checkup, that acknowledgement form, I think could be an early indicator that we need to go out and make some outreach and get some education done. So that's where we are on the education and outreach. Are there any questions on that before I get to my final item?
Fellow commissioners, I just want to say to my fellow commissioners, if you guys have a Twitter account or a LinkedIn account, make sure you follow the State Ethics Commission so you can retweet and share the LinkedIn things as well, just because that will help to expand our base and get it out there. But I appreciate the work that's been going into our social media and our outreach and stuff. I mean, we've had more now in the last month or two than we've had in like a year. So this is great. And he also didn't mention, he has a plan for after every single meeting, we'll do a press release and we'll have certain items that we'll do every single time in it. So it's it'll be consistent. It'll be all the time instead of sporadic. So I think that's good as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The final item on my report is the commission meeting status. And so, our next meeting is February 16th. We have, as we're working through the cases, there's a substantial agenda for the closed review panels today. I would imagine, so there's 6 cases on for today. There will be another 4 to 5 cases at the February panels. And I think by the time we get done with the March meeting, we'll have no 2019 cases left out there hanging. And we might have 1 or 2 2020 cases that we're just working on wrapping up. So I think by March, we'll be on track to be in a place where those cases that are pending review panels are the most recent cases and down to a really manageable level. The investigations team, really the whole team has been working really hard to get those cases that have been pending a panel review to the panel. So for those of you that are on the panel, brace for a busy today and a busy February, and then we'll be in a really good position in terms of cases that are kind of the jurisdictional hopper. We have 5 currently. I think the majority of those are not likely to go, and so it's becoming a really manageable caseload.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to the staff for just doing a huge job getting these cases caught up and stuff. I know you guys have been working very hard, so thank you to all of you for all of your extra hard work. So thank you. All right, so does that conclude your report then?
Yes, Chair, that concludes my report for agenda item 4.
All right. Any other questions for Executive Director? All right. Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agency status report as presented? and discussed. Got a motion?
This
I'll
is
make the motion.
Oops. Commissioner Yin had her hand up, so go ahead.
I'll make the motion to approve as presented.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Right, next item, item number 5, consideration and approval of the 2022 Nevada Commission on Ethics Public Records Policy. I would like to call the item and ask our Executive Director Armstrong for his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, this is Executive Director Armstrong. This item is a update to our public records policy. In order to comply with the public record statutes, the agency needs to have some certain items in their public records policy, which includes an analysis of what is confidential versus what is public, a reasonable time frame for response, and a schedule of reasonable costs for public records. And then it needs to be clear on how the public makes that request. So if you take a look at the policy that is in your packet, and it starts on page 67 of your packet, it really focuses on those items that I just covered. Access and how you access and request records is on page 2. The timeframes for compliance are page 3. And really, you try to get the record to the individual who's making the request as soon as possible. And if there's a reason that you can't, to be transparent and communicate with them as you work to get that records request completed. And then the fee schedule is discussed on page 4, and then it's attached as page 7 of the actual policy. I think now what we see a lot of is requests for records that are primarily electronic, and so there are not a lot of costs associated with public records requests other than staff time in completing those. And so we don't have, I think, a lot of, well, I haven't seen any yet. Doesn't mean we don't get a lot of them, but requests for actual physical hard copies, most requesters are fine with electronic copies, which is much more cost efficient, but we're required to make sure that we have a fee schedule established. The public records policy is posted on our bulletin board out front, and makes it easy for the public and the press to appropriately and effectively request documents, and then for us to be responsive to their requests and as transparent as we can be. So with that, it's a pretty straightforward policy. I'm happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Any
Chair,
questions?
do we have, Ross, do we have this on our, once we approve this, if we approve it, are we going to post this on our website so that people have access to it? And also, have you considered having people file these requests online?
Thank you, Vice Chair Dufferin. Yes, the policy will be posted on the website under our resources tab, and the request that is on there will be a separate form that folks can complete. In terms of completing a form like they do for our acknowledgements and complaints, I think we could discuss with PDI the ability of having that. That probably comes at a cost, and I don't know that we have
Yeah,
a
if we don't have
frequency.
if we don't have a lot of requests, it's probably not necessary. You said that and you're not really sure at this point, but it doesn't sound like we get a lot of those requests, and maybe Commission Council can agree to that, but sounds like if we don't get a lot of requests, it's probably not worth the time to do that.
I just wanted to put on the record, Tracy Chase, we do have the ability for them to send us an email through our NCOE email, and we do have an online form that they can fill out. So I think it's already part of our functioning website, and we have received public records requests through the website itself. However, I think I've done 2 in the last 2 months. So our prior policy was posted as well. This is an updated policy. So we've always been in compliance with the public records law. Part of the update was to actually change the name of the executive director and a lot of the, housekeeping measures when there's a turnover in the organization.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Right. Then I'll call for a motion to approve the Commission's public records policy.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
All right. Is there a second? All
Second.
right. Second by Commissioner Towler. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Right, next item, it's item 6, consideration and approval of the telecommuting policy. At this time, I would like to call on our executive director for his presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Executive Director Armstrong. For the record, item 6 is a telecommuting policy that I think will assist us in helping to manage the telecommuting as part of our employees' work plan. Obviously, when everything shut down, it was easy. Everyone was working from home, and it's different than when everybody's back in the office. And now there are some benefits to telecommuting that were realized during the pandemic. And so this will establish kind of in writing some of those expectations. Some folks might ask why we would necessarily need telecommuting policy, or we would even want team members the ability to telecommute. I think that there's some real benefits to the workflow. There's also benefits to having a competitive, I don't want to say a benefit package, but the reality is that everybody has realized some benefits during the pandemic of the ability to work from home on an occasional or regular basis. And so in order to be competitive in recruiting and retaining employees, I think every entity, public and private, is going to have to take a look at how they manage the telecommuting process and to balance the telecommuting process with agency operations to make sure that there's no, diminished agency operations, which, we saw the ability of the commission to operate throughout COVID with a lot of working from home at that point. There's the additional benefits, secondary benefits, in terms of the environmental benefits of reducing commute and emissions, and then employee health and morale, also with the ability to work from home. And so now what we see is a sort of a lot of ad hoc requests. And through this telecommuting policy, it would allow the supervisor to enter into a telecommuting agreement with the employee. It establishes that there's a safe working place at home, that the place to work from home is not, in violation of any OSHA codes, and that the appropriate equipment is there to work and do the work. And that there's also assurances in terms of being able to maintain confidentiality, security, and the safety of the employee. So the bulk of the telecommuting policy talks about really that agreement, and through that agreement process, setting the expectations and a regular analysis of whether the position is appropriate for telecommuting. If there are any performance issues that may be, a basis for revoking a telecommuting agreement and having someone return to the office. Just so the commission is aware, in my mind, it would make sense to manage this where on a quarterly basis, I'd be getting with the team to see if there are particular planned days for telecommuting and to ensure that we have that appropriate office coverage and offices opened up, and that we're not spreading ourselves too thin with lots of folks, in telecommuting status. So that is the basis of the policy, the bulk of the policy, and it really sets out kind of that standard for entering into that telecommuting agreement and for regular review to make sure it's appropriate. So now that we are hopefully coming into the backside of this pandemic, where we are able to think about how we want to be operating long-term, this gives us that structure in order to implement telecommuting policy for our employees in the agency. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Oscarson.
Mr. Armstrong, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The assessment that would be done based on confidentiality, which is really my biggest concern. Who would do that? Is that a self-assessment? Is that somebody else, a third party that would do that assessment? Is that done by the manager? How is that done?
Thank you for the question. The good news is that unlike some of the other agencies I've been at, the ethics team has done works as almost paperless. And so that's the paper documents you worry, I think, the most about. Make sure there's a locking filing cabinet or something at home to maintain those, especially if there are other individuals in the home. But most of our work is done on our servers or on online platforms. And so Each of our staff members has access to a VPN, which is secure. The state EATS ensures that it's secure. And so that part of the confidentiality piece is established already through EATS and their VPN system. If there are any threats to the VPN security, or I get lots of alerts from the EATS team in terms of software vulnerabilities, and so they keep us pretty apprised if there are any security threats to confidentiality. So because the commission's work is done so much electronically and not so much in paper, we would obviously want to make sure there's a secure place in the working place at the home where if there is paper, it could be secured and kept from individuals who should not have access to it. So it's a combination, I guess, of a self-assessment and the supervisor asking the right questions to make sure there's the appropriate security for the confidential information.
Hey, thank you very much.
Any other questions from the commissioners?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions or comments.
Yes,
If I may.
Commissioner Fowler.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've reviewed a lot of these and I reviewed this one. There's always three things that I kind of look for and, make sure that the supervisors or the employer knows about, so that I mention those. The first is, like you talked about, if you end the agreement, as it clearly says, you can end it, at any time. There's plenty of cases recently that are talking about that's probably going to be viewed as a adverse employment action. So it's just something to be aware of, because like you said, if there's a performance issue, you're going to bring them back, right? I think that's what you're talking about. And it's similar to, all this case law we have where it's like moving the employee's desk closer to the boss's office, right? So it's just something to be aware of. I point that out because it's not, sometimes supervisors or administrators don't make that connection where it's like, yeah, you're coming back, and it's not because you're doing a great job being at home, right? So their grievances could be filed based on that. So it's something to think about. The two things I always look for in this, though, is internet access is a huge thing. And this one does talk about making sure there's good internet access. I've seen that to be what employees will end up bringing a claim for reimbursement for, even though it was clear that they weren't allowed to bring a claim. So, for example, I've learned a lot about the difference between a dynamic and a static IP address, right? And at our houses, we probably all have dynamic, but at work, you always have a static IP address, and that can cause issues. And so there's been situations where an employee thinks, I'm going to upgrade my internet to a static IP address, and then once I get called back into the office, I'm going to submit a claim because now I'm stuck with this contract for a static IP address. So yeah, there was a reference that the internet will be maintained by the employee, but I think, I would bolster that maybe a little more, just as you have in other areas where you say, any costs, any upgrades, any, decisions for better equipment for internet access are the sole responsibility of the employee. I think that's a good thing. Also, what happens when the internet goes down? Because that happens especially in residential more so than business internet. So does that person report to work until their internet gets put back up, or are they allowed to work on other things? I try to put that in, if there's a way to do that. The third and final thing is workers' compensation. That's a whole new area, right? Because we have so many employees now that are working from home in the US. The reference I saw to that, I'd probably, I'd encourage you to make some change to that. That was not in the policy itself, but in the telecommuting request is where I saw it. And it was on probably, what is that? That was not numbered. So page 2 at the bottom, if a work-related injury, so it's just not, the sentence, I'm sure you got it from somewhere else. So I'm not trying to be critical, but there's problems with those two sentences. Just the structure doesn't make sense. If a work-related injury, employee will report it immediately to my supervisor. But the way I've seen it effectively written is more in the line of, the idea you want to convey is, even though you're working at home, the workers' comp, policy and procedures need to be followed. So instead of saying, hey, an injury may be under workers' comp only if it occurs in the workspace, what I'd encourage you to put in there is and talk with risk management, but something like, if an injury occurs during work hours, whether I'm at the physical office or at my remote home office, I will follow the procedure and report it to my supervisor pursuant to the state policy on workers' compensation. And then you let the workers' compensation process decide whether that's a covered work injury or not. And that way you keep it under the state policies and procedures instead of creating a new procedure because somebody's working at home. Because that's, like I said, that's the new trend is people get injured. And the question is, I don't know the answer to all these things. What if you slip and fall at your work bathroom during work? That's going to be workers' comp, right? And that's pretty common. A lot of injuries happen in bathrooms at work. What happens if you slip and fall in your bathroom at your house during work hours? So there's some interesting issues there. And then what if that occurred when you're using the restroom during your lunch break at home? If that were the case while you were at work, it'd be a pretty good claim that workers' comp would have to decide. But I'd encourage just a reference back to the state procedures as opposed to creating a new procedure.
Thank you. That's helpful feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Towler, for your insights there, because I know you deal with this all the time, so.
I do, unfortunately.
And it gets tricky. Any other comments or suggestions?
Sure, I have a couple comments.
Yes. Vice Chair.
Thank you. I really appreciated hearing Commissioner Oscarson and Towler's input. Those are some concerns that I didn't think about, the workers' comp issues, but for sure the security issues, having dealt with that in my prior job. Also, I think the policy should really stress that this is a secondary option. That primary option is to work in the office whenever possible, because that's what the expectation is. I think this is not something that we should expect to do on an ongoing basis, and unless that's something that, maybe we're doing that already. I don't know, during this pandemic, but I think, the budget includes offices that the state taxpayer pays for. So I think we should obviously utilize those at every chance we get. But also beyond that, I think we should look at I tried to find other state agencies' policies on telecommuting, and I found one that I think is a good one that's very comparable to what this is. It's the Department of Administration's their own telecommuting policy, which is dated 7/1/21. So it's been in force for quite a while. Maybe you've seen that, maybe you're already aware of it, but I think we should look at that too and make sure that there's nothing that's in conflict with their own compared to ours. But I wholeheartedly think that we do need this. I just think that we should maybe ratchet it down and make sure that, based on the comments from the other commissioners, that those things are being dealt with. So also looked at SAM, State Administration Manual, and I looked at any policy directives that have come out during COVID, and I didn't see any conflict with this policy. So I'm sure the executive director probably did the same. So I think we're comfortable with this. I'm comfortable with this going forward once those other changes that were mentioned earlier are made. Thank you.
Not seeing any other comments. I think my fellow commissioners covered my areas that I was thinking about, and I think this is good. We should have something like this in place. So, Commission Counsel Chase, since we've got these revisions, so can we make the motion to approve it with the items that my fellow commissioners have suggested be included?
Yes, you may.
All right. So do we have a motion to do that? Yes, Commissioner Lowry.
My preference would be that we not vote on it today and that we bring it back at the next meeting, because there really was some comprehensive feedback there that I think could make some substantial changes. So I'd like to review it again after those incorporations are made and maybe bring it back next time.
That's fair enough. So we just
Madam
don't.
Chair Wallen, this is Commissioner Grunwald.
Yes.
I agree with Commissioner Lowry.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Madam-
Commissioner Oscarson, and then we'll do Commission Counsel Chase.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree that it should be reviewed, but with the caveat that maybe Mr. Armstrong could get a one-on-one with Commissioner Teller to talk about some of the changes he talked about so that he could make sure he had them all down and they could review those items specifically.
Okay. Right,
Not a
Commission-
motion, just a suggestion.
Yes, I figured that. Commission Counsel Chase now.
Madam Chair, you can go ahead if there's an appetite for a continuance, do a motion for continuance to include the items that were discussed and put on the record for the commission for revisions. And so it would come back at the next regular meeting.
All right, so do I have a motion for continuance? Commissioner Lowry.
I would make that motion.
All right, is there a second?
Commissioner Grun, second. Commissioner Grunwald, second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Right, thank you. Next item, item 7, consideration and approval of the penalty payment schedule authority. I'd like to call the item and ask our executive director for his presentation on this item.
Thank you, Chair. This item, I worked in consultation with the Commission Counsel on. In a number of, it's typical in ethics cases that an individual who's the subject of a complaint will be assessed a penalty either by stipulation or commission determination. And so there's usually, as part of it, if it's a negotiated one, there'll be a payment amount. And what we see a lot is an acceleration clause where if an individual misses a payment, then pursuant to the agreement, the entire amount is due right at that moment. And as we've seen, especially given the pandemic, that individuals will sometimes hit uncertain financial resources or employment issues. And so this proposal is to grant authority to the executive director in cases where there's good cause to enter into a written agreement with the individual to adjust the payment schedule so that we can get to agreement and get the individual in compliance without having to bring the entire agreement back to the full body. It does allow for an up to 6-month extension of the time frame for those payments, and it requires notification back to the commission when such an agreement has been entered into. And so we think this can be an efficient way to ensure that the commission is still getting its fees paid without necessarily having to send someone off to collections if they hit an economic struggle, and not having to bring them back to the commission and explain what the hardship they're going through to the full commission in a public meeting, but to come to an agreement between the commission's executive director and the individual to adjust that payment schedule as necessary. So that is this proposed approval of authority. Future stipulations would likely, I would imagine, reference that authority in the payment schedules to make sure that everything is clear. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I worked closely with Counsel Chase on this, so she may be able to answer questions as well.
Fellow commissioners, any questions on it? How many individuals do we have that are kind of hitting this situation?
This is Executive Director Armstrong. We currently have one that is in this particular situation.
Okay. All right, I don't have any other questions. I think this makes sense rather than having to go through a full-blown new stipulated agreement just to change the payment terms to extend it. Bring some efficiency to the commission, that's for sure. Right, do I have a motion to approve the payment plan, the penalty payment schedule authority?
I'll make that motion.
All right, do I have a second for that?
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Right, next item is item number 8, update on City of Reno policy instituted pursuant to approved deferral agreement in ethics complaint number 20-10C Weber. This is an informational item only. And at this time, I would like to call on Associate Counsel Bassett for her presentation.
guess I need to unmute myself. Morning, commissioners. For the record, this is Elizabeth Bassett, Associate Counsel for the Commission. This is an informational update only regarding the City of Reno policy that has now been instituted pursuant to the deferral agreement that this commission approved in ethics complaint number 20-010C regarding Bonnie Weber. As the commission will recall, one of the terms of the deferral agreement it approved, resolving that ethics complaint, was that Councilwoman Weber would work with Reno City Manager and City Attorney's Office, along with the Executive Director, to update and revise City of Reno policy number 401 to do two things: to update and revise the policy to address situations where city staff would attend meetings that are hosted or organized by elected officials, but not open to the general public, and also update and revise citywide training on that policy and encourage impacted city officials and employees to receive training on the policy. This was a creative but important condition to the agreement with Councilwoman Weber that is consistent with our guiding principles and in alignment with the commission's mission. As required by the deferral agreement approved by the commission, City of Reno policy number 401 has been updated and revised. The revised policy prohibits Reno City Council members from giving any public or private orders to any subordinate of the city manager, and requires that they obtain prior written authorization from the city manager before any city employee may attend a non-public meeting held, hosted, or at the request of a city council member to speak on topics related to the employee's public duties or city business. The revised policy requires that in making a determination whether to authorize city employees to attend non-public meetings to speak on topics related to the employee's public duties or city business, the city manager may consider a number of things. That includes the purpose of the meeting, the audience, whether the council member has filed a declaration of candidacy or accepted candidacy for a public office, whether staff participation substantially furthers city interests and avoids both actual and potential conflicts between a council member's private self-interest and the public interest, whether staff participation does not detract from maintaining appropriate industry relationships, the propriety of any anticipated gifts, including fee waivers, meals and refreshments, and reimbursement of expenses, and also the application of the ethics law in 281A. This is a significant revision to policy number 401, which previously did not provide any guidance regarding when it was appropriate for City of Reno employees to attend or speak at non-public meetings. The revised policy also prohibits city council members from requesting attendance or presentations directly from city employees, but requires that requests be made to and approved by only the city manager. This protects city employees from being subjected to pressure to participate in non-public meetings or any other activities without the city manager's review of the request. Along with the revised policy, the city manager will also require council members to submit a private meeting request form in advance of any non-public meeting, disclosing the topics to be discussed at the meeting, how city staff participation will substantially further city interests, who the audience at the meeting will consist of, why the general public will not be allowed to attend the meeting, and any other considerations. A copy of the revised policy, the private meeting request form, a cover memorandum from the city manager regarding the revised policy and its purpose to ensure compliance with NRS 281A 400 subsection 7 regarding the use of government time, property, and equipment, and a memorandum from the city attorney's office addressing frequently asked questions regarding ethics law, donations, and the use of municipal personnel, property, and resources have all been distributed by the city manager to city personnel. The adoption and distribution of the revised policy satisfies the requirements of the deferral agreement approved by the commission and clarifies for city council members, city staff, and for citizens the appropriate process that must be followed to ensure that city staff's presentations at non-public meetings comply with the ethics law. We appreciate the city's timely completion of this requirement. I would like to thank Councilwoman Weber, Reno City Manager Doug Thornley, City Attorney Carl Hall, and Deputy City Attorney Jonathan Shipman, who's on the call today, for their work on this revised policy and for complying with the deferral agreement in a very timely manner. I'm happy to answer any questions any of the commissioners may have about the revised policy or about the deferral agreement.
So commissioners, any questions? Comments? Well, I think this policy kind of addresses some of the issues that we were having. So I want to thank the city of Reno for getting on this right away and taking care of it. So, right. This is not a item that we're going to vote on. So we're not taking any action, so I'll just go, there's no other questions or comments. We'll just go ahead and close the item at this time. So thank you, Associate Council Bassett, for your presentation. Item 9, approval of proposed stipulation in complaint case number 19-102C, Quigley, former member of the Nevada High-Speed Rail Authority, State of Nevada. This time I'm going to call the item, and I want to indicate for the record that the members of the review panel will not be participating on this item pursuant to NRS 281A.2204. The review panel members are Commissioner Yen, the presiding officer, Commissioner Lowry, and Commissioner Towler. At this time, I would like the attorneys and parties to identify themselves for the record. So,
Good morning, Mark Ferrario appearing on behalf of Ms. Quigley.
thank you. And on our side,
This is Associate Counsel Bassett for the Executive Director.
thank you. Mr. Ferrario, do you have any other comments or additions to Associate Counsel's presentation that she's going to be making, or presentation? Oh, sorry, Associate Counsel Bassett, please do your presentation. Sorry,
Absolutely.
skipped, sorry.
The proposed stipulated agreement before you today recommends terms of settlement for ethics complaint number 19-102C concerning Tina Quigley, former member of the Nevada Rail Authority. The proposed the complaint in this matter alleged that Ms. Quigley used her position on the authority and the relationships that she developed in that public position to obtain private employment with Virgin Trains. The commission directed the executive director to investigate Ms. Quigley's alleged violations of NRS 281A 400, subsection 10, and NRS 281A 410, subsection 1. The documents and interviews obtained during the course of the investigation show that Governor Brian Sandoval appointed Quigley to the authority, which selected Express West as the franchisee in November 2015. Thereafter, Virgin Trains USA acquired Express West and became the high-speed rail franchisee 4 years later in March of 2019. In June of 2019, Virgin Trains approached Ms. Quigley and offered her employment. Ms. Quigley resigned from the authority on June 30th of 2019 and accepted the position of Vice President of Business Strategy with Virgin Trains in October of 2019. Ms. Quigley left her employment with Virgin Trains in March of 2020. A review panel determined that just and sufficient cause existed for the commission to render an opinion regarding those same allegations. Thereafter, the parties attended a settlement conference with Commissioner Amanda Yen, who was one of the members of the review panel, and reached the agreement presented today as a result of those settlement negotiations during the conference. The terms of the agreement require that in return for dismissal of the alleged violations, Ms. Quigley will complete ethics training within the next 6 months, and will recognize that as a member of the authority, she was a public officer, and that the ethics law prohibited her from using her position with the authority or any contacts made through that position to seek or accept employment. The dismissal is also based on a lack of sufficient evidence to support the violations by a preponderance of the evidence, and the mitigating factors that Ms. Quigley has not previously been the subject of any violation of the ethics law, that Virgin Trains purchased the franchisee Express West more than 3 years after the authority selected Express West as the franchisee, that 4 years passed between the time Express West was selected by the authority as a franchisee and when Ms. Quigley accepted employment with Virgin Trains, that the last meeting of the authority board took place on July 18th, 2017, and the board met only 3 times after selecting the franchisee in November 2015, that Quigley is no longer employed by Virgin Trains, and that Ms. Quigley is not currently a public officer or employee. Given the information obtained in the investigation of this matter and the discussions at the settlement conference, the executive director and I believe the terms of the stipulated agreement presented today with Ms. Quigley are appropriate. We would like to thank both Ms. Quigley and her counsel, Mr. Ferrario, for their cooperation and patience in the investigation and resolution of this matter. We would also very much like to thank Ms. Commissioner Yen for her time and assistance in reaching a settlement of this matter. I am happy to answer any questions you may have about the proposed stipulated agreement.
Fellow commissioners, any questions? All right, now, Mr. Ferrario, you may make some additional comments if you have any, or
I really don't. I think Ms. Bassett set out the history and how we got here. I would just also echo her thoughts and thanks Commissioner Yan and staff as we work through this. Everyone was very professional. I think we have the right result.
thank you. Right. Not seeing any other comments, questions from my fellow commissioners. All right. I'll entertain a motion. Now, this will have to come from those that were not on the review panel. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the stipulation in case number 19-102C, Quigley, as presented. And I will also at this time and direct Commission Council to finalize the stipulation in appropriate form. So do I have a motion to that effect?
Commissioner Grunwald, I so move.
All right, do I have a second? I'll second.
Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Right, motion carries. So thank you very much for your participation today, Mr. Fiario, and thank you for working with our team here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Next item is item 10, commissioner comments. Are there any comments from the commissioners that you want to identify, any future agenda items, or you have anything else to say? Comments. I just want to say, Executive Director Armstrong, good first meeting today. You had a lot of material to cover today. I mean, you definitely got your feet in the fire. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment. Executive Director Armstrong, have you received any additional public comment?
I am not aware of any, but I will ask Executive Assistant Pedroza if we've received any during the meeting.
This is Executive Assistant Pedroza. We have not received any written public comment, nor do we have any public comment on Zoom.
All right. And then I just want to note for the record that Investigator Terry was also participating in the meeting today. He wasn't on when I first started it, so. And now we have reached item number 12. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that, Chair.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you guys for a great meeting, and we'll see you next month. And don't forget to look at AB 65 and send it off. Comments off.
Hold
Right.
it. What about the review? This is Commissioner Grunwald. What time do you want the review panel to begin?
Can we start that at 11 o'clock?
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Bye.